The Protestant Reformation was a seismic shift in European history. It was a movement that began in the early 16th century and fundamentally altered the religious, political, and cultural landscape of Europe. The Reformation was sparked by a variety of factors, including widespread dissatisfaction with the Catholic Church, the rise of humanism, and the advent of the printing press, which allowed for the rapid dissemination of new ideas. It reshaped not only the religious landscape, but also the political, social, and cultural fabric of the continent. The Reformation led to the establishment of Protestant churches and the decline of the Catholic Church's influence in many parts of Europe. It also had profound effects on European society, including changes in education, the role of women, and the relationship between church and state. While Martin Luther's defiance in Germany ignited the flames of reform, England experienced its own unique and tumultuous Reformation. Luther's 95 Theses, posted in 1517, challenged the Catholic Church's practices and doctrines, leading to a wave of religious upheaval across Europe. In England, however, the Reformation took a different path, driven by the personal and political ambitions of King Henry VIII. This English Reformation was deeply intertwined with the ambitions and desires of one man, King Henry VIII. Henry's desire for a male heir and his frustration with the Pope's refusal to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon led him to break away from the Catholic Church and establish the Church of England, with himself as its head. Henry's quest for a male heir and his struggle with the papacy set in motion a chain of events that would irrevocably alter the course of English history. His actions led to the dissolution of monasteries, the redistribution of church lands, and the establishment of a new religious order in England. The English Reformation was not just a religious movement, but also a political and social revolution that had far-reaching consequences. This essay will delve into the complexities of the English Reformation, exploring how Henry VIII's personal ambitions became the catalyst for a religious revolution. We will examine the key events that shaped this period, including Henry's marriages, the Acts of Supremacy, and the dissolution of the monasteries. We will also explore the motivations of those involved, from Henry himself to his advisors and the religious leaders of the time. We will examine the key events, the motivations of those involved, and the lasting impact of this tumultuous period. The English Reformation was a time of great change and upheaval, but it also laid the foundations for the modern British state and the Anglican Church. The legacy of this period can still be seen today in the religious, political, and cultural life of England. The story of the English Reformation is one of power, faith, and the intricate dance between the two. It is a story of a king who used his authority to reshape the religious landscape of his country and of a nation that grappled with the consequences of this change. The Reformation was a time of conflict and controversy, but it also brought about new ideas and ways of thinking that continue to influence England to this day. It's a story of a king who challenged the authority of the Pope, of a nation grappling with religious change, and of the enduring legacy of a period that continues to shape England's identity today. The English Reformation was a pivotal moment in history, and its impact can still be felt in the religious, political, and cultural life of England. By understanding this period, we can gain a deeper appreciation for the complex and multifaceted history of England and the enduring legacy of the Reformation. On the eve of the Reformation, the Catholic Church in England was a powerful institution. It stood as a towering presence in both the spiritual and temporal realms, commanding respect and reverence from all corners of society. It held vast wealth, exerted considerable influence over people's lives, and was deeply embedded in the fabric of English society. The Church's coffers were filled with tithes, donations, and land revenues, making it one of the wealthiest entities in the land. Its influence extended beyond the spiritual, touching upon politics, education, and even the daily routines of the common folk. Monasteries dotted the countryside, serving as centers of learning, charity, and spiritual life. These monastic communities were not just places of worship, but also hubs of intellectual activity, where ancient texts were preserved and copied, and new ideas were discussed. Monks and nuns dedicated their lives to prayer, study, and the service of others, providing education, medical care, and hospitality to travelers. The Church's teachings, rituals, and sacraments permeated daily existence, shaping the rhythms of life and death. From the cradle to the grave, the Church was a constant presence, marking life's milestones with baptisms, marriages, and funerals. The liturgical calendar dictated the flow of the year, with feast days and holy days providing structure and meaning to the passage of time. However, beneath the surface of this seemingly unshakable institution, cracks were beginning to show. The grandeur of the Church's exterior masked internal struggles and growing discontent. Corruption, simony, and the sale of indulgences were becoming increasingly common, leading to widespread criticism and calls for reform. There was growing discontent with the Church's wealth and power, particularly among some nobles and members of the growing merchant class. These groups, who were gaining economic and social influence, began to resent the Church's dominance and its demands for financial contributions. They questioned why the Church should hold so much power and wealth, while many of their own struggled to make ends meet. Some questioned the Church's teachings and practices, seeking a more direct and personal relationship with God. They yearned for a faith that was less mediated by the clergy and more accessible to the individual. This desire for a more personal spirituality was fueled by the spread of literacy and the availability of religious texts in the vernacular. The ideas of reformers like John Wycliffe, who had challenged papal authority and advocated for the translation of the Bible into English, had taken root in some quarters. Wycliffe's followers, known as Lollards, continued to spread his teachings, emphasizing the importance of Scripture and the need for a church that was more in line with the early Christian community. These seeds of dissent, while seemingly dormant, would find fertile ground in the tumultuous events that were to unfold. The dissatisfaction with the Church's practices and the desire for reform were not isolated phenomena, but part of a broader movement that was gaining momentum across Europe. England may have seemed a bastion of Catholic faith, but change was in the air. The winds of reform were beginning to blow, and the stage was set for a transformation that would reshape the religious landscape of the nation. The Reformation was on the horizon, and the Catholic Church would soon face challenges that would test its very foundations. At the heart of the English Reformation lay Henry VIII's obsession with securing the Tudor dynasty. This obsession was not merely a personal desire, but a matter of national importance. The stability of the realm hinged on the continuity of the Tudor line, and Henry was acutely aware of the precarious nature of his family's hold on the throne. Having ascended the throne in 1509, Henry was a young, charismatic king eager to prove himself. His early reign was marked by a vibrant court life, filled with jousting tournaments, hunting expeditions, and grand feasts. Henry was not just a monarch. He was a Renaissance man, excelling in music, sports, and intellectual pursuits. His court was a center of culture and learning, attracting scholars, artists, and diplomats from across Europe. Yet, his reign was haunted by the need for a male heir to prevent a repeat of the dynastic struggles that had plagued England in the previous century. The Wars of the Roses, a series of civil wars for control of the throne, were still fresh in the collective memory of the nation. Henry's father, Henry VII, had ended these conflicts and established the Tudor dynasty. But the legitimacy of their rule was still fragile. A male heir would solidify the Tudor claim and ensure the continuation of their lineage. Henry's marriage to Catherine of Aragon, however, had produced only one surviving child, a daughter named Mary. Despite numerous pregnancies, Catherine had been unable to provide the much-desired male heir. This failure weighed heavily on Henry, who saw it as a divine sign of disfavor. Catherine, a devout Catholic and a beloved queen, had her own struggles, facing the pressures of producing an heir while dealing with the personal grief of multiple miscarriages and stillbirths. Desperate for a son, and increasingly enamored with Anne Boleyn, A lady-in-waiting to Queen Catherine, Henry sought an annulment. Anne was not just a passing fancy. She was intelligent, ambitious, and had captured Henry's heart and mind. She promised him the son he so desperately needed and represented a new beginning. Anne's influence over Henry grew, and she became a central figure in his court, much to the dismay of Catherine and her supporters. He argued that his marriage to Catherine, his brother's widow, was cursed by God and therefore invalid. Henry turned to the Bible, specifically Leviticus, which stated that a man who marries his brother's widow would be childless. He believed this was the reason for his lack of a male heir, and used it as the basis for his request for an annulment. This theological argument was not just a personal conviction, but a strategic move to gain the support of the church and the nobility. The Pope, however, refused to grant the annulment. The refusal was not just a religious decision, but a political one. The Pope was under immense pressure from Catherine's nephew, Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor, who wielded significant influence in Europe. Granting the annulment would have meant alienating one of the most powerful rulers of the time, a risk the Pope was unwilling to take. Caught in the complex web of European politics and unwilling to alienate Catherine's powerful nephew, the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, the Pope's decision left Henry frustrated and furious. The political landscape of Europe was a delicate balance of power, alliances, and rivalries. Henry's desire for an annulment was not just a personal matter, but a significant political issue that had the potential to shift the balance of power in Europe. This impasse, known as the King's Great Matter, would have far-reaching consequences, setting Henry on a collision course with Rome. Determined to secure his dynasty and marry Anne Boleyn, Henry took drastic measures. He broke away from the Roman Catholic Church, leading to the English Reformation. This monumental decision not only changed the religious landscape of England, but also had profound political and social implications. The establishment of the Church of England, with Henry as its supreme head, marked the beginning of a new era in English history, one that would shape the nation's future for centuries to come. In 1534, after years of fruitless negotiations with the papacy, Henry VIII took the dramatic step of breaking from the Roman Catholic Church. Through a series of acts passed by the English Parliament, Henry declared himself the supreme head of the Church in England. This act, known as the Act of Supremacy, marked a pivotal moment in English history. No longer would the Pope hold sway over the English Church. Henry, driven by a potent mix of personal ambition, political expediency, and perhaps even genuine religious conviction, had established himself as the ultimate authority in matters of faith. This bold move sent shockwaves throughout Europe, challenging centuries of papal supremacy and ushering in a new era for England. The break with Rome was not merely a political maneuver, it had profound religious implications. While Henry initially sought to maintain Catholic doctrines and practices, the very act of separation opened the door for further reforms. The seeds of Protestantism, already present in England, found new life in this climate of religious upheaval.